I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Colorado Center for Aging to our Aging My Way webinar. And we're delighted that Bob Brocker, founder and president of AgeWise Colorado, is actually co-hosting this webinar. And also would like to thank several of our primary sponsors for our series of events this May, which is Older Americans Month, that being DRCOG, Area Agency on Aging, AARP, and Volunteers of America. So like I said, this is the third event we've had this month. We had an in-person event on May 13th, and this is the second webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And my thanks to Kelly, Andrew, and the CCA board for including me here today. As I'm your substitute moderator since Andrew wasn't able to make it today. A little bit about me, and I'm pleased to serve on the board of A Little Help, the advisory board for the CCA, the DRCOG Advisory Committee on Aging, and as the president of AgeWise Colorado. So in my work life, I was a railroad guy who wore many hats in that industry and a consultant to a wide variety of businesses. And for the last dozen years or so, a volunteer leader in the nonprofit sector, which included launching AgeWise Colorado last summer. So we're a nonprofit working to provide a safe internet landing spot for all Coloradans who need information, education, and vetted service providers to help make the aging journey a smoother one for family members or themselves. So check us out at agewisecolorado.org. Now, the order of the session today is that first, Allison Hiltz from AARP and I will provide a quick summary of a few key pieces of aging-related state legislation that was introduced in the 2022 General Assembly. So Allison is the State Advocacy Director for AARP Colorado. Then we'll hear from my friend Ben Moultrie, who actually is a real rocket scientist, on the topic of technology and aging, followed by two most interesting examples of best practices in aging. The first on home sharing and the second on what is happening in Carbondale to promote better aging in community. So each of these segments is going to be about 12 to 15 minutes. And we should have time for a few questions along the way. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat if you would, please. And we also encourage you to put your contact info in the chat. You might even make a few new friends today, who knows? So moving on to our first segment, which is legislation for Aging My Way. I'd like to introduce Allison Hiltz, and I think I can do this. Allison is the State Advocacy Director for AARP Colorado, where she and a team of volunteers fight for policies that empower older Coloradans to choose how they live as they age. This legislative session, they tracked over 100 bills and took positions on well over half of those. Prior to joining AARP Colorado, Allison served in local elected office and worked for the National Conference of State legislators. So, yeah, legislatures, that's the right word. Okay. Now, there were over 100 bills monitored between AARP and CCA, and that were advocated for in the 2022 session, which is it's about 1 out of every 5 bills that was actually introduced in the session this year. Was very busy. And we do thank all the many volunteer advocates who participated in the process in any way, including, showing up at the Capitol, testifying in committee hearings, providing testimony remotely, or simply calling or writing your legislators or staff. And so there are so many ways to make your voice heard. So I think we're going to launch right into this very short review of a few key bills. And I'm going to begin with one that's called HB 22-1076. So this one, it's already been signed by the governor. and it allows hearing aid providers to prescribe, select, and fit appropriate hearing instruments and assistive devices in person or through the use of telehealth. So it's quite an expansion of the ability for people to get help with their hearing in ways that they couldn't do before. The next one Allison's going to talk about is SB 22-219, which is the regulation of dental therapists. Go ahead, Allison.
Yes, thank you. So 219 is creating kind of the structure to have dental therapists in the state of Colorado, which are below a dentist but above a dental hygienist. They're kind of filling in that gap. And specifically, it's a statewide licensure, but really aimed at addressing some of those shortages in rural areas. And just for context on how this came forward, 53 out of Colorado's 64 counties are designated as a dental professional shortage area. And we have 5 counties in the state that don't have one single licensed dentist. And if you look at, for example, Medicaid access to dentist participation, we're at about less than half of what the national average is for dentists that are serving Medicaid enrolled patients. So really important in getting some of that access in both rural areas, but also across the state. That just happens to be where we're seeing most of the shortages. And I think I have the next bill too, which is Senate Bill 154. And this is a big one. This is increasing safety in assisted living residences. And this one, I will be fully transparent. The governor is currently considering whether or not he's going to veto it. And this is a pretty important bill. It does 3 main things. The first is it establishes a process to protect resident rights in assisted living facilities regarding involuntary discharges. And there are similar processes exist for nursing homes and Medicaid home and community-based services, but not in assisted living facilities. It also improves qualifications for the residence administrators by requiring additional training. And it also increases a extremely low cap for penalties. So previously, the cap was $2,000 for facilities for any violations that resulted in harm or mistreatment or abuse, etc. And that was $2,000 a year per facility. So it didn't matter how many abuses and how many or how egregious, it was the same. So this bill originally removed that cap completely, but it was amended to put back in a cap that was much higher and also more per incident. And that was the compromise. So those penalties, those financial penalties, are heavily lobbied, or heavy industry opposition occurring right now both throughout the legislative process, but specifically right now, we're hearing to the governor. And so we are hoping that he does sign this bill. It is a very important one for folks who are older and already vulnerable to injury and abuse. So very important bill. And I think the next one is back to Bob. Back to you, Bob.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks, Allison. So the next one is 189, which is the Colorado Geriatric Provider Pipeline Program. So this bill did not pass. It was introduced late in the session, had a price tag, but it'll be back in 2023. So as many of you know, Colorado has the second fastest growing rate of people over the age of 65 of all the states in the country. And by 2050, and this is going to be true for most states actually, about a quarter of our population will be over the age of 65. There's already a severe shortage of geriatric trained clinicians, pharmacists, dentists, etc. And so these folks, I'm one of these folks actually, will be putting a pretty high demand on the state's healthcare system. So the couple of examples here about savings by having more people in this pipeline, more healthcare providers with geriatric training, is, it costs about $2,000 a day now to be in a hospital. And so if it's been shown that geriatric trained physicians can get a person out of the hospital, 1 or 2 days quicker. And so that's a savings. So these things all add up over a period of time. So the idea here was is still to create this multidisciplinary program and get more people trained in being healthcare providers who have geriatric training. So it's a very important idea and bill, and so we'll be working on it again over the summer and bring it up again next year. The next bill here is one that has passed. It's not yet signed by the governor, but probably will be. It's the Rural Provider Stimulus Grant Program. So this one creates a affordability stimulus grant program, and an associated advisory committee. So it's going to be administered by Healthcare Policy and Financing. The idea is to provide grants to qualified rural healthcare providers to improve healthcare in rural communities through modernization of information technology infrastructure and expanded access to healthcare. How that all shakes out, we will see. Okay, Allison.
Thank you. You get to hear from me on a couple more bills. A couple are really brief. So we had House Bill 1333, which was just signed, and that, without getting too far into the weeds, essentially allows wage enhancement supplemental payments to be made so that we have a $15 minimum wage in nursing homes for workers there. And a couple other ones, and I'm going to move out of kind of the healthcare space now into just notable bills that occurred. Another one was House Bill 22-1029, and this is related to PARA. So the full title is the Compensatory Direct Distribution to Public Employees Retirement Association. This passed, and the original bill, the intent is to repay the money that was paused into PARA at the onset of COVID. The original bill also included an additional $79 million to repay the lost investment gains that would have been realized during that time. That piece was amended out. And so what was eventually signed was just the repayment of the money that had not been put in. And so the lost investment gains was not put back into the fund. And then the next one is, I'm sure, something that everyone is familiar with, is the modernization of the Older Coloradans Act. And that one was signed fairly early on. I think it was one of the first bills to be signed, but don't quote me on that, but it was early on. And this is a really comprehensive bill that does a lot of different things with the goal of supporting older Coloradans through community planning, social services, health and well-being services, and then strategies for preparing the state's infrastructure generally for an increasing older population across the state. And I think what's important to note about this too is that it specifically seeks to infuse equity into its work by reducing health disparities, prioritizing planning for those with the greatest economic or social need, and removing barriers for those who are underserved, and doing this in a lot of different ways, but in part by adding new members to the Colorado Commission on Aging, which is a governor appointee, and establishing a liaison in the Department of Human Services to work with that commission, and then also to create an advisory committee bringing together multiple state agencies, and then lastly creating the Lifelong Colorado Initiative, which has to do with policy evaluation, data and metrics, and reporting out what that looks like. So happy to share the text of that bill, because it's a beast, and it came out of a lot of really hard work from folks who were on this call with SAPCA, and took many years to get to this point. And so really excited to see that come forward. And then I think I have the next one too, which you get to hear from me a lot today, which is Senate Bill 146. And this one was also signed by the governor. And this is the Middle Income Access Program expansion. And so this transfers $25 million into the Department of Local Affairs for the expansion of the Middle Income Access Program, which is administered by CAFA, which is Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, which then will provide funding to developers that are seeking to build affordable rental housing with an AMI, which is area median income of 80%. And this kind of fills in that gap where there's currently housing for 60%, but that 60 to 80% gap is something that needed to be addressed, and that's what's addressed in here. And we can talk more about housing offline. I can get into that with more people and what this does and why that matters. But for the intents of this discussion, I will leave it briefly there, and I will throw it back to Bob now.
Okay, thanks, Allison. The last one I'm going to talk about has more twists and turns than the road that goes to the top of Mount Evans. It was the HOA board accountability and transparency. So this one came about primarily because a small group of people decided that it was time to address this issue of people being foreclosed on for relatively minor infractions in their HOA situation. It could be a fine, for leaving a garbage can out too long that wasn't paid, and then multiplied over a period of time from $50 to $5,000 or some other number. And so this one actually works on capping some of those fees and the interest and the penalties that go along with those, establishes the ability to use small claims court to settle disputes, and requires HOAs to perform a reconciliation of reserve accounts when they perform a reserve study. That became obviously important with that situation of that collapse of the tower in Miami. So a lot of activity in that regard, and a lot of changes that were made along the way. And the last bill, Alice is going to talk about.
Yes, me again. So the last one is Senate Bill 203, which is the Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, also known as PACE. And this is a bill that requires the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, along with the Department of Health and Environment, to develop a regulatory plan to establish formal oversight requirements for the PACE program. And so this stemmed out of some events that happened earlier this year, and this is a bill designed to provide some additional oversight to that program and ensure that it's working properly, and will include reimbursement methodology discussions and reporting back to the General Assembly as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Now I'm going to just real quickly share my screen just to show you. Many of you already know this, but just in case, if you want to look up a particular bill, you go to this website and you just plug in the bill number right here, for example, this one, and you just click this little button here, and there you go. It brings up the bill, and you can click on this, read the bill. You can also go down here a little bit further and read the fiscal note, which is always a good way to go about this because it's a summary of the bill. So with that, I think we will move on here to our next segment, unless anybody has a question at this point in time. Okay, now I'd like to introduce my friend.
That was me. Sorry, I went to hit the chat button and I hit the wrong one.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Sure. Just
Hi.
a quick question. That'll be fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question about, and I'm Leslie Kalishman, and I'm an advocacy volunteer who works with Allison at AARP Colorado. And for Senate Bill 154 regarding the requirements for assisted living facilities that passed legislature did not pass, which is still waiting to be signed by Governor Polis and he's being lobbied heavily. What can we all do? Is there some kind of a strategy that you know, our two organizations, which are concerned about this bill, can do? I mean, is there a plan, or should we all be should we be sending, you know, asking membership to send emails to the governor?
This is Jeanette with CCA. And yes, we are asking people to get out to and talk to the governor, to send him emails, to put something on Twitter, to any way possible to let him know that this is important. And we need people from all over the state to do it, not just from the metro area. So if you can get information out to anybody within your groups, please do, because he is being lobbied really, really hard from the industry, and they are asking him to veto this bill, and we really need him to pass it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. Would you say anything differently about that, Allison, or is that good?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Bob, you have your hand up, Bob Murphy.
I was just gonna add that we've launched an intensive Twitter campaign, and that's the most immediate. And we tagged the governor on every single post, acknowledging that he's considering the veto, invoking the size of our own membership, invoking the tragedy in our amongst the deaths in nursing home, amongst our most vulnerable loved ones over the last couple of years. So we're trying to pull out all the stops. We think it's a very important bill.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And we have a question about Twitter, so maybe Allison, you can plug something in there. Okay, thanks everybody, and we do appreciate your efforts to lobby the governor as hard as other people are lobbying the governor, or harder actually. So our next segment is technology for aging my way. So I'd like to introduce my friend Ben Moultrie. Ben is an advocate for innovations for the future of aging and longevity, has an extensive background in technologies and management, has been a researcher, educator, developer of space technologies and software systems, a deep space navigation systems engineer, principal manager for software outsource service, project executive, program manager, financial planner, and investment advisor representative. Ben's volunteer experiences have included multiple organizations in aging, including the Aurora Commission for Older Adults, AARP Colorado's advocate team, and executive council, and the Colorado Commission on Aging, SAPCA, the Next 50 Initiative Board of Trustees, and the Center for Inclusive Design and Engineering Advisory Council, for which he is the founding and current chair. And by the way, Ben's retired. Ben.
Thank you, Bob. So, you know, I've been asked basically to address the topic of technologies for aging. So that's in some ways kind of tough, because there is just a growing sweep of technologies that can be applied to aging where we want. So I'm just going to touch on some of those, and many of those you sort of know in terms of the technology trends. But one of the things I think that's important is really to understand that technology per se is merely an enabler. But in order to, there's a larger context for having access to those technologies on a broad basis. So with that in mind, let's give kind of a quick sweep overview of technologies that really hold promise for aging well and healthy longevity and living where we want. And I use the word promise rather than potential intentionally, because I strongly believe that technology is very much part of the future of successful aging and, sort of a healthy longevity too. So let's just start out with some things we're all familiar with. Hey, Alexis, fundamentally, what is that? Well, it's voice control. So you don't have to push buttons. That's sort of in the category of what we're seeing now that's becoming quite common in products. Voice control, a gesture, things of that nature where you can actually kind of do things in a much more intuitive sort of way than figuring out basically what buttons you have to touch. So we see these types of capabilities these days in our home systems that provide both active as well as passive capabilities to monitor what's going on in our home, to monitor what's going on around our homes. Capabilities that have advanced to the point and will advance further, but allow us to enable us to recognize people, to recognize packages, to recognize pets, to manage our home systems remotely and just with our voices. Robotics is a significant area of growth these days, not merely with a Roomba or something that can go around and sweep your floors, but even robotic systems that can help with the preparation of foods. Refrigerators have been around that can monitor basically the stock in your refrigerator and order groceries for you. The ability to live where you want to live is really expanding with drone delivery systems. I just read yesterday where Walmart is now expanding the number of states where they are delivering packages of products by drones. Companies such as UPS have been doing this for several years, where you have certain medical disorders or disabilities, like mobility disorders. We see advances in personalized transportation, stabilizing personal mobility systems, if you will. Segway, the old stand and ride around on two wheels. They have a pod, and they're not the only ones, by the way, that I think is worth looking at. We see a lot of work going into automobiles in terms of self-driving systems or self-navigating systems. Well, that same technology could be brought into other areas of our lives. We're seeing more and more services coming online that can help with the digital literacy. Here in the state, out of CU Denver, there's a project underway named Supporting Older Adults Through Relationships and Resources with Technologies. Free service, it's kind of a trainer model. They're at a stage now where they're recruiting trainers across the state to work with older adults in terms of digital literacy. Google has given $10 million to AARP to work in a very similar kind of way, and they're working then through the organization Oates that was acquired near the beginning of last year to deploy, if you will, the capabilities to help older adults with technologies. So things are just coming along in ways and where the technology is just amazing, and it's going to become even more fascinating. But what is really kind of needed, in my sense, is not merely the the technological capabilities, but one, they need to be brought into the marketplace. And so what we're starting to see is a ramp up of investments in an area that's referred to commonly as age tech, products and services. But we also need kind of the policy environment that will support not only the use, but the access to those technologies on a broad basis. So I'm going to transition here and just point out maybe a couple of interesting resources that I think both will fascinate, but also broaden the context of aging in place, enabling technologies, and the type of work that needs to be done that is less technical, more policy oriented as well. So just on a fun side of this, I was at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, back in January in Las Vegas. I go there every year. I mean, it's fun to watch these trends, but we're seeing things focus on things like the metaverse, improvements in holographic capabilities. So you can imagine using those things in terms of engaging people, family members, groups. There was a humanoid robot that gained a lot of attention. It was really fascinating. The features are just absolutely amazing. And was backed by AI capabilities. And so it actually interacted with people in the crowd. The robot was referred to as Ameka, A-M-E-C-A. So Bob, I can send you a link to all of this if you like. Let's see, the Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging just last month published an interesting report titled Advancing Tech-Enabled Health and Home Care. I think for advocates, this is truly worth having a look at. And Bob, I can send you a link to that or the actual report as well.
Yeah, and whatever links you have, send them, Ben.
Okay. So that's pretty much it. I'm open to the questions and thoughts and whatever.
Anyone have any questions for Ben? I mean, I in particular find the whole idea of voice control to be really something that's needed. You know, we all carry these little things around, but you know, I'm finding it harder and harder to see the exact right letter, you know, when typing. And so using voice is an option today, but it could also be an option for a lot of other things in the future. You know, some of us have these Alexa devices in our homes, and you know, my wife keeps telling me to unplug ours because it's listening. So at times when we don't want it to be listening. So so there's that too, and the whole field of robotics. I mean, Ben, you might mention what's going on at DU with the robotics piece too, if you would.
Oh, sure. I think you're referring to Ryan.
Yes.
Ryan is basically the sort of interactive companion. So it's applicable to areas of interest such as social isolation. So, but Ryan is not alone. This is just happening just across the globe. And frankly, they're becoming much more sophisticated in terms of their capabilities to interact with people. You know, there's I don't know entirely where to go with this primarily because there is so much going on. And guess what? We're just at the very early, beginning stage of all of this. And that's why I really place an emphasis on the need to focus on the kind of regulatory, the payer kind of environment, and things of that nature, and the innovations that are needed there.
Okay. And one quick last question for you, Ben. You mentioned policy environment. So can you give us an example of something that we as advocates for the aging community could do regarding policy related to technology?
Sure. Something that's kind of already done. Let's think in terms of Medicaid waivers, for example. Looking at more, taking advantage of opportunities for more research type activities, demonstration projects, and how they might apply to the area of home-based care.
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any? I didn't see any questions in the chat for Ben. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ben. Much appreciated. Okay, our next segment is we have a video. Andrew is on the video. He's going to speak a little bit, and then we have three folks who are on the video, who were on the call here today. Well, one just had to drop off, but so we have Allison from Sunshine Home Care, and Gia from Neighbor to Neighbor in Fort Collins, and then Amy Ford from Silvernest, who did just have to drop off. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, but first get this thing open.
Bob, we can't hear Andrew.
Okay, so you can't hear this.
No.
Okay, now help me remember what I have to do to make the sound come through.
Okay, yeah, pull that back. Click on the little speaker that's the third icon in.
Yeah.
And see if that, okay, now it's muted, so unmute it.
That didn't work.
And it should be coming out of your speakers.
I could hear Andrew myself, but but sharing it though, that might be different. Let me see. Oh, here it is. I've had to do this before. This should work.
This morning, but my daughter is graduating from elementary school. I would have loved to have been with you. I'm with you in spirit, but glad that Bob Brocker and AgeWise Colorado helping to co-host this. I'm sure you're having a great and informative time. I wanted to take a minute here and talk about this next segment and video. Here at Colorado Center for Aging, we're all about raising the voice of older Coloradans in different platforms, different forums, and part of that is tied up into our Voices on Aging initiative. Voices on Aging is all about raising up the diversity of voices in Colorado. Diverse geographics, diverse demographics, to make sure that the Colorado Center for Aging is as representative as possible for our state. Now, part of the Voices on Aging initiative includes this next segment and what we call best practices groups. Those groups bring together organizations that do like services so that they can synergize and have conversations and learn from one another. But then we create a video out of it so that we can broadcast that to you so that you, in whatever corner of the state you're in, might also learn about these kind of services and who knows, maybe develop one for yourself. We want to raise the voices of older Coloradans. We want to raise a diversity of voices for older Coloradans, and that means raising a diversity of organizations that serve older Coloradans. This video is about home sharing, and the video will explain what that's all about, and it helps older Coloradans to age my way. Now, there's 3 participants in this next video. There's Amy, she's from Silvernest. They are a national organization that does home sharing, and it's web-based, but they also partner with local chapters so that they can do home share programs. And then there's Sunshine. They are Denver-based, and in that region, they've done this for quite a while, and they also have a social service element to their home share program. And then thirdly is Neighbor to Neighbor with Gia, and she is up here in northern Colorado where I'm at. And their program is very new, so you're going to learn about what it takes for a program to develop from the start. So I hope you really enjoy this next video. I hope you get a lot out of it. And if you want to start your own home share program, know that these resources are available to you. That's why we're doing these best practices groups videos. Have a great day. I wish I could be there with you, and I will catch you next time. All right, take care. Enjoy the video.
I'm Amy Ford, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Business Development for Silvernest. And Silvernest was born in Colorado, in Denver, actually, but I happen to live in Alexandria, Virginia.
My name is Gia Heflin. I am the Senior Renter Program Manager at Neighbor to Neighbor, and we offer services in Larimer County, and I am located in Fort Collins, Colorado.
I'm the founder and executive director of Sunshine Home Share Colorado. We are a social work model home sharing program that is very care management based. We serve the Denver metro areas, and then we also have expanded into Colorado Springs.
It's a host that has space to share, renting out that space to a home seeker in exchange for rent or chores, help around the house. And it's specifically sharing space.
Home Share provides a safe space for individuals to live affordably and comfortably, and also be able to share interests and likes. So Neighbor to Neighbor's mission is to open doors and advance lives through homelessness and home ownership by providing sustainable housing, supportive services, education to families and individuals in Larimer County. Now, we envision a community where there's an opportunity for individuals to have access to a stable home and for the home to become a foundation for success. And so that is what home share is all about. It's all about companionship. It's all about individuals building homes in comfortable spaces, and it's all about affordability.
It's this unicorn solution where all these benefits can be in one, where it's an actual actionable thing that many people can do if they're open to it, and it can reduce isolation and provide that companionship. It can increase financial flexibility. It can stabilize housing. It can help with chores around the house. You just do all of these things in one, which I just don't know if there's many solutions out there like that.
It fills the gap for sure. It is very hard, one, for individuals to look for housing because housing isn't offered the same way that it was offered back in the day in newspapers. You're not driving around looking for a home. So I'm glad that we have the providers already ready for a seeker. And the next job is just to match them. And then we have that affordability piece, which really just brings it up a notch. Like we are really filling a gap that is necessary in our specific community.
We offer what's called financial wellness and empowerment. And so we have a trained financial social worker. So it is a great opportunity to help people on a better path to financial and economic stability.
I don't know if you all know this about Colorado State. They do have a housing fair every year, but a lot of the options are not affordable, like home share. And so it would benefit if we were able to come into the mix so that students can know, like, hey, this option may not be best for you, especially if you're of a lower income, but this program is perfect.
One of the things that we know is people home share because they have to economically. And so being intentional about where we market and outreach so that we are reaching into neighborhoods to really get to the people that we know need to share.
A lot of my seekers currently are also 55 and up. And so we're just trying to do better outreach and reaching, you know, the student population, reaching communities of color. And so we're just trying to make the program more diverse. So that is something that is kind of at the top of my mind that I really would like to see get better by the end of this year.
Everything that we do is designed to support safety in the matching process, connecting people to other services and resources in the community. Because one of the things that we found in our older matches, I would say about a third of our matches are people over 87, I would say, that what we find is sometimes home sharing is a piece of what they need in order to be able to age in place. And so we will also be looking at how do we put all those other pieces of the puzzle together to really support that ability to remain in their home.
The most significant challenge is, of course, finding those hosts and finding those who are willing to consider this as a solution and nurturing them and can, you know, sort of inspiring them to, you know, share their home and live in this way. That's probably a shared challenge across the board. I don't think many of us have trouble finding seekers, you know, home seekers. The demand for affordable rental is astronomical, but inspiring those that have extra space to think differently about that space and consider living with someone, and especially when maybe they haven't done so in a long time, is a pretty significant challenge.
Do it. I would say do it. Be patient. It's going to take some time. You're going to be changing your processes a lot. You might even be changing how your staff does things a lot. Be mindful of the individuals that you are trying to help. And just be ready to be on a roller coaster ride.
We've developed this partner model where, you know, we have a lot of interest from all types of county governments and council of governments and housing counseling agencies and area agency on aging. Many of them are trying to push themselves to innovate and to offer different and unique things and other types of programs that can support the population or their community they're serving. But they don't necessarily have the capacity or the resources to do it all themselves. And so the model that we offer to those that are interested, if it's a good fit, is usually there's some sort of pot of resources that's available. And then they hire Silver Nest to help them launch a program.
There's nothing better than when you make a good match and you find two people and their lives are just better for it. And it really makes your heart happy.
Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you. Thanks for you folks who participated in that. I don't know, Gia or Allison, do you have anything else you'd like to add to what was in your video?
I saw a question in the chat about what kind of vetting is done in the program. In Neighbor to Neighbors Larimer County program, we do background checks, we do reference checks. We also do in-person interviews to kind of meet with the person. We do home inspections. We also get proof of their income to make sure that they have that affordability range that the landlord is looking for. So those are the typical vetting processes for Neighbor to Neighbors program.
Okay, thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to our last presenter, and that's Nikki Delson. Nikki is the co-chair of the Carbondale Age-Friendly Community Initiative and the Carbondale Bike Pedestrian Trails Commissioner. She's also, in her spare time, a daughter, wife, mother, grandmother, and nationally recognized expert in child sexual abuse and interpersonal family violence, and has turned into a grassroots community organizer. So, Nikki, take it away, please. Your sound is off, Nikki. There you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I know we're getting to the end of the show, and I'm going to do a little bit of a different kind of twist on Aging My Way. I'm going to talk about aging in community, and I'm going to share some stories specifically about the town of Carbondale and how we have used age-friendly communities and all of the support that they give us in really changing the narrative in the town and moving from our vision of what it's like to age in community to actually getting policy changes. So I will share my screen. Bob, let me know if that has worked. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about age-friendly communities and why languaging our conversation about aging, kind of like aging as a verb rather than aged, is really important in terms of bringing a town around to accepting the vision and converting a vision into actual policy, and how we are using that kind of model in the town of Carbondale. So let's see, how do I move this?
You can just click on it. You should be able to do that way. The other way is hit the page down button on your keyboard. That might work too.
There we go.
Okay.
So the AARP network, I know that people always associate AARP with older adults and only older adults, but in 2012, AARP joined as an independent affiliate of the World Health Organization of Age-Friendly Cities and Communities, and there are currently over 660 age-friendly communities in the United States. Colorado was the third state to join. There are now 19 communities in the state of Colorado, and Carbondale became the 13th state. We're a small town, just geographically, to give you an idea of where we are. We're about 30 miles south of Aspen and north, about 13 miles north of Glenwood Springs. The age-friendly communities and the World Health Organization have tremendous amount of research to support what makes a community more livable. And I think the thing that we all share in common is that when local leaders consider how to improve the life for everyone, including the very young, the very old, and all of the people in between, when you plan and strategize within your community for everybody, if you're planning for the very young, you're also planning effectively for those of us at the end of that long lifeline. The AARP network of age-friendly communities focus on 8 specific domains of livability. You could find out more by going to the AARP website and learning about it. But I'm going to focus specifically on 3 of those domains and how we in Carbondale, and when I say we, so the Carbondale Age-Friendly Community Initiative is an ad hoc group of older adults where between the ages of 60 and I think the oldest person on our group is 85. We are just an organization of older adults. We have no staff, we have no budget. We are just community involved, representing how to create a community that really supports living a good life within the community. So I'm going to tell you about how we effectively changed policy in outdoor spaces and buildings and transportation and civic participation. So the narrative we speak really affects the way we talk about it and talk about ourselves and talk about aging, really impacts the policy that we seek. And so we hear a lot of conversation about aging in place. And for many people, that association is with aging within your own home, which is what most older adults would really like to do, to age in their own home. And so we've heard today about different kinds of resources and supportive legislation that would actually help you to do that. But when you language it that way, aging in place, rather than having an umbrella of aging community, you're only thinking of the space where you are aging and not really whether or not the community supports and has infrastructure to allow you to maximize the way that you want to age. So aging in community is really a more dynamic way of having a conversation. And once we started languaging it that way, aging, as we're all along the path of aging, we got way more traction in terms of an entire community, particularly the town government, listening to what we were saying. So the conversations that we have is that we're all aging. From the time of conception, you start aging. And we're talking about aging as a process. We're not talking about aged, just those at the end of life. And just, I mean, my mother lived to be 103 years old. She died 2 years ago. And at one point, somewhere around the time she was 99, she said, I think I have to start considering myself to be an old person. So how you consider yourself, when she turned 103 and people would ask her age, she said, when I tell them my age, I think I'm giving them my temperature. So when you think about aging and have a conversation about aging, you can talk about how the community will support you throughout your lifestyle. Aging is characterized by constant change and activity and progress, and that's what we want the community to be invested in. And some of us, particularly myself, are further along that road. So we have a lot of hindsight about the mistakes that we've made, about what has been important, about what we value, and have a vision towards the future. But we also know that those behind us in some ways have a greater vision. We may have the perspective, but we're looking also to the young to give us a vision for the future. And at different places along that pathway, as we're moving along that lifeline, we may need assistance. But at most places along the road, and what we want everybody to hear, even at the end game, so to speak, that we are contributing members of society. And we want the town, and the town of Carbondale now sees us as a resource rather than only a user of resources. So I'm going to talk about the domain of transportation and how we use that to bring together both the young and the old and everybody in between. So we had a project. Most of our work is policy driven. We do particular programs only if we see it as affecting policy. So bicycle safety is important because many of us are still bicycle riders, but may have some limitations in terms of hearing as we're along the trails. We want people to announce when they're passing, and we want young people to learn about bicycle safety. So we did a project where we got a local bicycle store to give us bells, good expensive bells at their cost. And we set up a on what we have a program here on First Fridays, and we set up a place where we said that we will install the bicycle bell, bring your bicycles. So we had very, very young children, but all of the older adults were doing the installations on the bicycles, setting them up, and that we had people have to read bicycle safety rules and make a promise that they would follow the rules of the road. So that was one event that we did. We gave away over 300 bicycle bells over 3 different times that we appeared on First Fridays. Then what happened is we have a local assisted living facility, and they heard that we were giving out bicycle bells. And so they asked us whether we would install bicycle bells on their walkers and on their wheelchairs, which we did to the great surprise of all of the staff in the facility, because they started going down the halls and using the bicycle bells to demand that their food would be served a little faster. And just as a side, what happened once is after these bells were installed, there was a woman, the woman all the way, she's on the left of my screen, had a fall in her room, and she was unable to reach the bell that would get the nurses and attendants to come into her room, but she was able to reach the bicycle bell on her walker to get immediate assistance. Another example in Carbondale in terms of the domain of transportation was to build safer multimodal corridors. And we did that by utilizing the AARP walk audit, and we audited every single priority corridor in the town of Carbondale and brought our results to the Bike Pedestrian Trails Commission, which took it very, very seriously and then made recommendations to the Board of Trustees. We looked at how the streets and the sidewalks were being used by people of all ages and all abilities. And as a result of us doing the walk audits and presenting them to the Board of Trustees, we were able to get the town, and remember, this is a town of maybe, I think our population is now about 7,000. We were able to get the trustees to move almost $750,000 from their budget to finalize a multimodal corridor that would be safe for bicycles, pedestrians, and slow down the automobile traffic. Because if you want to age in community, you also want to be healthy and be able to walk and utilize all of the pathways in the community. And this last picture where you see the orange cones, I took this picture yesterday because they are finally doing the work on one big section of this multimodal corridor. Another example from the town of Carbondale was in the domain of outdoor spaces and buildings. And what we did is we went down to, when I say we, this is the core group, the steering committee from the Carbondale Age Friendly Community Initiative, and we talked with people who lived in assisted living, who were mobile but needed assisted devices in order to get around. So you could see people, there was somebody in walker, 2 people using walkers, there's a man at the end with a cane, and there are people in wheelchairs. we took a walk with them around town near their facility to see how far they could walk before they actually needed to take a rest, and found that there were no benches nearby, that they would continue walking if they had a place to stop and just take a breather. And so we walked with them and found a location for that. And then we worked together with the town of Carbondale, the Parks and Recreation Department, the building department, and the facility. The facility gave the town an easement for a space behind the facility. And we were able to, two donors heard that we were interested in doing this project, and we, within like 1 week, got the finances to put in 2 ADA accessible benches. They're ADA compliant, and we had it designed so that people would be able to have a conversation. And you can't see it, but in front of it, there's a waterway that runs in front of it where there are also ducks and birds. And so it is used now by people who use this pathway, and enables this group of people who live in a neighborhood to actually get around the neighborhood. One of, I think, the most successful things that we did was to be able to utilize our energy and our community organizational skills to get the town to incorporate the notion of aging in community into the town's comprehensive plan. And this is just being finalized this year. And this is really in the domain of civic participation, because the way that you get a community to institutionalize the policies that's needed to make a town age-friendly is by showing up and building relationships with the people who have the power to actually make this change. And when we learned that the town was going to upgrade the comprehensive plan for the town, we showed up in force, older adults, along with developers, younger people who are looking at how the town had to grow to accommodate an increasingly older population that were still very, very vital. So our showing up really demonstrates that older adults are not only there to ask the town to provide services and resources for older adults, but really to contribute our years of expertise and our energy into making it happen. And so we showed up at every single focus group, at every single meeting that they had. And this is the draft of the policies and procedures that, and the visions of what a community will look like if aging in community is listed alongside of housing and development. And just this week, we were asked by the department, the planning department, to assist them in converting these visions actually into public policy that will change the Unified Development Code. So I spoke very, very fast, and I'm very happy to take any kinds of questions or comments that people have. This is how you get in touch with us. We have been thrilled to be able to work with AARP and the network of age-friendly communities and utilize all of the resources that are made available to us in order to make Carbondale a more age-friendly community. And thanks for letting me share.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki. That was great, and it's wonderful to see how people can really make a difference in their community if they get charged up and get involved and speak up. I liked your example of the planning team with the city. actually getting yourselves interjected into that process so you can make a difference in how they do things. Because too often, I think we all notice this, that sometimes, people in government mean well, but they don't always ask the people who need to have some input, how should we really do this? So that was very good. Thank you. And does anyone have any questions for Nikki?
This is Kelly. Nikki, I guess I would ask, what do you think is really critical in terms of getting a group together? I mean, what's the motivating way to go about doing that?
I think I can only share from our personal experience how it evolved here is that there's a lot of what I would call like uncommitted complaining, where people just complain that this is happening or that's happening or not happening, and why don't they do this? They being, whoever they think can make change happen. And I think those of us, just a bunch of people got together and said, well, let's turn this into let's see what we could do. They were just people who were tired of complaining and were really looking for a focus to make something happen. And at the time, I happened to be on the Bike Pedestrian Trails Commission and was looking for a resource to help us bring to government a way to change a dangerous intersection. And I came across and figured that just, this is when older adults, you bring to this point in your life experience. You've had so much experience doing things. You just have to learn where it is that you have to go. And I came across AARP Age-Friendly Communities. At the time, I didn't even know it existed. And we found the AARP Walk Audit. And that gave us a resource and a tool to build relationships within the town. So what I'm talking about today, our end result is just, it's only 3 years, but the first year and a half, we did nothing but build relationships. We went and we met people and we talked to people in government. And that's one of the beauties of small town rural living, is that you can actually do that. So I think motivation and turning complaining into action, that's what has worked for us. Is we don't listen to uncommitted complaining. If you're complaining, you better commit to doing something.
Yeah, I love that term, uncommitted complaining. Yeah, that's great. There's a lot of that out there in the world. So just turning that around makes a huge difference. Any other comments for Nikki? Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, but before we do, I'm going to put Corinne's email address into the chat. She'll be happy that I did that. And then if you have questions that you think about after this session is over, and you can send those to Corinne, and she'll direct them to the right people, whichever one of the segments it is. And so what we've covered here today is a lot of material on Aging My Way strategies. So we've talked about advocacy and how you can get involved in advocacy at every level of government, really. We've talked more about state, but as Nikki has shown us, that there are opportunities at every level of government. Ben talked about a variety of things that are going on in the technology world, and we're going to all be looking forward to seeing what some of those look like. We already have, and we're going to see a lot more in the future. Home sharing, which is a terrific concept, and what I heard from the people who are talking about home sharing is the hardest part of the whole job is finding people who are willing to provide their homes as a sharing place for others. And I think there are probably some ways that we can help collectively in helping those folks find those people who might be interested in sharing their home. and may not even have thought about it. And then finally, as Nikki mentioned, aging in place, that's a phrase that's thrown around an awful lot. And it's true. I mean, I want to age in my home, and most people do. But if you don't have the community support to help you do that in terms of being able to get around, transportation, healthcare, and access to food and so forth, it makes it really difficult. So those are all excellent points for all of us to keep in mind. And the last one being, if you have time to get involved and you are truly interested in helping, people age better in Colorado, there are so many volunteer opportunities available, and many of you are already doing those opportunities, or using those opportunities, but you probably know other people who are among those uncommitted complainers who could get involved. So thank you so much again for being with us here today, and we very much appreciate your time and attention, and thanks to all of our presenters. And you folks have a great afternoon and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Go shopping, whatever you do on Memorial Day. Have a cookout. Okay, thanks everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.